Cracking, Jake.
Yeah, well, I think we're live anyway. I believe we are.
Let's find out what happens, see if we get any questions.
Yeah, I'll just check. Yeah, I believe we are. We'll see what happens. Yeah, so I believe, well, congratulations are in order. A cracking weekend for you, which is going to be our sort of focus of today's live stream. Brilliant weekend for you. Just tell us exactly what happened, a bit of a build up, so building up to the final, and then what happened actually on the day.
To be honest, Jake, I've had a lot of big matches in succession. So I was in the Matches Final and then Riverfest, and I started the week. I'm not going to lie, I was a bit broken. I was absolutely exhausted. I jumped from one form of fishing to another. Absolutely no chance in match this, although I was quite happy with how I fished. In Riverfest, I was disappointed with myself second day. I fished for big fish, and it's not my style really. I like to get bites. I was on a terrible peg, and on the first day it didn't really happen. So I'd made these two huge efforts. I spent 2 weeks carp fishing, 2 weeks river fishing.
Yeah.
And and it hadn't really gone my way. So coming down here, I'm running the event. So there's no rest. You're straight into it.
That's an obstacle in itself, isn't it? Because and obviously there will be a lot of match organisers who are watching or will watch this back, and running a match, it's a thankless task, but there's a lot of pressure on running a match, making sure that everything goes right, the pegging's correct, because if you get the pegging wrong and all of a sudden it makes it an unfair match, you'll just get a load of people moaning. Yeah. There's so much pressure in that in itself that must take away from some of your own, as a competitor, some of your own preparation in that sense.
Yeah, without a doubt, the Feedermasters Final is the final that I'm the least prepared for fishing-wise. There is not a question in that. The fortunate factor of the Feedermasters Final is the prep isn't the same as a Riverfest or even a match this, really, to be honest, whereby you're looking at 10 or 12 different possible styles, possible scenarios. You're feeder fishing. You need to make sure your rods are solidly prepared. You've got a good selection of feeders and you've got a good selection of hook lengths. And if you've got those three things, feeder fishing, it's down to you as an angler, which is why I've fallen in love with it over the last 3 or 4 years, because I actually really enjoy prepping all my stuff. But I tell you now, nothing annoys me more when I'm fishing and I haven't got what I need. Whereas when I'm feeder fishing, that never happens. I've always got what I need, and I can use all my fishing skills to get the best out of my peg. And that's what I really like about it. And normally I suppose people might say, oh, you're preparing for the final, it takes more effort than, say, a normal 60 pegger. Well, I'll be honest, for me, it doesn't, because when I go down to the final, we have Darren Viles and Mick Viles and their dad, Ernie. We're like a little team of 4, and they do an amazing job. Darren and Ernie set up all the background stuff, the banners, all the stuff that needs sorting. Mick's already prepared things like the trophies and that, and all this is discussed and talked about as a group. But especially with how much I had on this time, I was going down there, and a lot of the razzmatazz, if you like, behind the event has already been done. So I'm not going to sit there and say, oh yeah, it's all me, because it's not. Throughout the year, I spend a lot of time working on Feedermasters, a lot. Yeah. And I think if you're prepared and everything's ready, then it's when you're actually down there, because I've got such amazing help, we're a team. It's not me who's running it. So, obviously we go down a bit earlier. I'll get down there Tuesday. It takes sort of 5 hours to get there. It's a long way for me from Leeds. And then had a little look at it. The water level's lower than normal. How are you going to get the pegs in? I've got numerous messages. Oh, good luck pegging it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
On Wednesday, got there really early, set off with Ben Smith, who's the manager there, and we started sorting all the pegging. And we do it, Jake. I do it with I take a rod with me, and I chuck out in not every peg, but like every area to make sure that the depth is adequate, that there isn't any potential snag. All the sort of things that I think are up for debate. We do that. And we ended up pegging it I was really happy with it. And I think I could tell by a lot of the competitors were saying you couldn't have really pegged it much better for 62 anglers, which is great to hear. And they appreciate the effort, because it was 1 o'clock by the time we'd finished on Wednesday. So only, I had a couple of hours fishing a little bit where we pre-baited as well, just to give there were sort of 5 pegs that never get fished. So we walked over there and pre-baited it, sort of thing. We made a big effort to make sure the match was good for everybody. Ultimately, as a competitor on my own match, I want the best possible match there is. That's the biggest thing for me, Jay. Like, I fish a lot of big competitions, and I will never diss anybody else, but sometimes it's frustrating when I believe that the organizer has just done the convenient job, not thinking of themselves as a competitor.
Well, like you've just mentioned there with that, so those 5 pegs that don't really get fished, well, you could go, well, we've got 57 decent pegs, and there's 5 up that arm where they never really get fished, but we'll shove them in because we need 62. Well, if you'd have done that, if you'd have then drawn that peg and you hadn't put a bit of bait in there to draw some fish, and you sat there and it's like no bites for 3 hours, and then all of a sudden you scrape 8-9 pounds together, and you're like, well, like, I literally had no chance. Well, at least by doing what you've done, the people they've got a chance of putting enough of a weight from what will be a tougher area, because it doesn't get fished as hard, but they're going to be in with a chance of putting a few fish in the net.
Well, Jake, it ended up being the best bit of the match.
Well,
so, this is what I'm saying. We didn't go down an arm. We could have gone down an arm a bit further. We took out all bits that we thought, but that's me because I'm a competitor. Because I want to win Feedermasters, I don't want any poor areas in. I want the best areas I can. Now, listen, it's not a fair venue. It's never going to be. But I want everybody to have some fish to go at, and they've got that. So, that's the most important thing for me. And to be fair, the finals that I've fished, the last couple of finals have been really good as well. Like, I've seen some, I saw some earlier in the year, and I'm thinking, why is there such big gaps and big spaces and stuff? But like, when I fished Maven Match this, it was excellently pegged. I cannot complain about it at all. And I just think when that's done, as a competitor, you're that much happier about your event. So anyway, that was all done. And then we have a practice event on the Friday, which 60 of the 61 finalists fished. So, that's unreal. And we had a couple of other guys come in. So every peg got baited on Friday. Everybody has a chance to practice under match conditions. No entry fees. Feedermasters still put up prizes for that Friday, like section prizes and top 3, just to keep everybody interested in it as a match. And it was, at that point, Jay, you'd think, oh, everything's buzzing. Well, let me tell you now, if I hadn't have experienced this before, I'd have been ready to break, because effectively I didn't get much fishing in on Wednesday. On Thursday, we went down an arm, and we caught some fish, some little fish and that, but I've got to be honest, I weren't really feeling it. I was like, oh, God, this is hard work. What's going on here? And then in the practice match, I drew potentially a really poor peg, in my opinion, and got beat up either side around me. They had bubblers, I didn't. And I sort of came off the bank on Friday thinking, right, I'm supposed to be defending champion here, but
you feel a mile off.
I'm not really catching anything. But when I won 2 years previous, the last time it was on, it was exactly the same. I came off the practice match. I mean, it was quite funny. In the practice match 2 years previous, with 3 hours to go, I almost packed up. I was that close to packing up. I had nothing. And I just thought, I'll just fish for a few roach, just for something to do. And I caught a roach, a bung for the last 2 hours. And that came in really handy come the day of the event. So, I was sort of thinking, okay, look, I've been here before. I know what the crack is. And then on the Saturday morning, I've drawn a really good peg.
And what had you said in your head was the target weight both days, or what did you think that you would need over the course of the weekend?
I felt that if you could catch 30 pound both days, you'd be top 3.
Yeah.
That was what I had said before the event. I didn't think there would be like, I couldn't see it being like 35 pound both days because I just felt that was unlikely. Maybe a winner could run away with it like that, but was unlikely. So I sort of thought 30 pound. And when I drew where I drew on the first day, it's a good area from like the peg to my right, 3 or 4 to my left. It's a really solid area. And I was really happy to be there because I thought I'm definitely fishing for skimmers. I've definitely got a chance of catching 30 pound. Let's go. You know, it's different to where I was the day before where I felt, could be a bit peggy here. And it proved that the next day, the peg I'd been on the day before didn't catch anything really in comparison to those around him. So, you know, it sort of justified what I said, but that's what happens sometimes. So my approach is dead simple, Jake. I personally believe Tamar is one of the easiest venues to fish when you're on fish. So anybody who says about the Feedermasters Final, Tamar, it's designed for the bagging anglers or the you know, it's a fish race. It couldn't be further from the truth, right? It's a little bit peggy. It's there's a target amount of skimmers to catch. As it happened, I caught 49 skimmers both days, 10 an hour on average, hardly bagging. And I think when they're in your peg,
what stamp are they? Like 8-10 ounce?
Yeah, 5 for £3 they are. That's what they average out at.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, and they're like that pretty much all over, to be fair. There's a little bit up the top where they're a bit smaller, but you know, you're unlucky really if they're not 5 for £3.
Yeah.
There's odd bream now showing, so people would have a chance to fish for bream for sure.
And were they in certain areas? I saw that a couple of people every now and then Joe would put up saying, "Oh, he's in a bream area." So were those bigger bream in certain areas or certain pegs?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in the half I was in, you've got a chance for bream on every peg, but I would also say there's definitely areas where that are more suited to bream. And I also noticed that really people who caught skimmers didn't really catch a bream. Chris Stevens caught one 4. Chris Stevens, who won the day one, he had 49 skimmers in a £4 bream, right, and he beat me by £3.11. Yeah. And I had 49 skimmers. So you can see what I mean. They're all a similar stamp.
Yeah.
You know, so you're targeting bites. There's no real big chucking, Jake. I mean, I heard of a couple of people chucking 50 meters, but I chucked 27 meters first day and 12 meters second day. So there's no big cast, nice soft rods like the SLs.
And what's determining where you're chucking there? Is that all depth or where you are and what, like, sort of how far into Tamar are you chucking? What's sort of determining where you've gone there? First day 27 meters, second day.
Yeah, well, there was a bubbler. There's these bubblers at Tamar, and they're like I've said this on previous things. I encourage any fishery boss to look into these bubblers.
They're cropping up at a lot of commercial venues, aren't they now?
These are epic, Jake. These are like proper big woof bubblers from the bottom. They put a lot of oxygen in the water, and the fish love them. So if you've got a bubbler, you've got a form of cover, and it's because the water level was so low. All of a sudden, these bubblers came into play for a lot of people. Not usually, like this bubbler that is 30 meters for me is usually 50 meters, and it would be, I don't know, 30 foot deep by this bubbler. All of a sudden, it's 20 foot deep by the bubbler, and it's only 27 meters or 30 meters. So it's a big difference. I think I could have fished shorter. You know, the day before Ian Didcott, he fished shorter than me, and he caught a load of fish. And I didn't know that at the time, so I could have potentially fished a little bit shorter still. But I just felt that 20 foot was a really nice depth. I didn't think it was too deep for skimmers. I love that, like with using a 1 ounce bomb. I like a 6-7 count for skimmers in this time of year. If you've got that, that's brilliant for me. I've been to Ireland and those sort of places. It seems like if you get into like a 10, 11, you're talking about near on 30 foot. And I personally think it's all right for odd bream or maybe big hybrids, but it's not really right for like masses of fish, if you like.
Yeah.
So
Just explain that to for people might not understand. Like with fish in a feeder, there's still an element of plumbing up and checking the depth, but you don't, not unlike a pole, you can't have a plummet on. Just explain that with a 1 ounce bomb, it's counting the time it takes for when the bomb hits the water to hit in the bottom. And
yeah, if you want to be really accurate, you can use
the rough calculation there.
Yeah, well, if you want to be really accurate, you can use a stopwatch. So you chuck it out, you start your stopwatch as it hits the water, and you stop your stopwatch when your tip bends back towards your slack. And I've done a lot of it, and I've plumbed several pegs that I've done it on, and I'm pretty confident it's not far off 3 foot per second. It depends on a couple of things, Jake, thickness of your line, but it doesn't really matter. So when I'm saying I had a count of 7 seconds, that's technically 21 foot. Let's call it 18 to 22 foot. It doesn't really matter too much. You're in a ballpark of depth. You know, when you count 3 seconds, I'm sure that's like 8, 9 foot. You know, I've chucked on pole lines before where I've had 9 foot and it's 3 seconds. So I'm really confident that that's a good representation of what I'm looking at, and it just gives you a bit of a guide, because generally speaking, you find skimmers in the deeper water, roach in the shallower water. That's a good guide for feeder fishing. And you know, so I spend a long time plumbing up, and the peg I was on gets steep really fast. You know, at 23 meters I had a count of 6, at 20 meters I had a count of 5, so it's dropping off like a foot every meter, which is a big drop, you know. It's quite steep. So obviously I always don't think it doesn't make a huge difference, but you've got to be in a ballpark area. So that's what I decided to fish on the first day. On the second day, I only had a count of 3, but that's because the maximum count I had was 4. The reason I fished in a 3 second day was the bit I drew was very narrow, and I felt that there was a lot of predators on the water, like cormorants. And I felt if I'd have fished in the middle at like 25 meters, I felt that I was right in the cormorant zone.
Yeah.
So I came closer to the bank, and I had a sort of thing in my mind that even if it didn't fish for skimmers, I'd be able to catch roach in that as well. So, you know, they're the sort of things that you're looking at when you're plumbing up. And for me, plumbing up is the most important thing. You go to Southfield, it doesn't matter where you chuck, you get a count of 1. So I don't even put a plummet on, you know, it's not even worth my time. At Tamar, I literally put my box down, right? Get my rod out and start casting in. I don't put any side trays on, nothing. Literally just start casting in, and I'll have a good 20 minutes. Right, I understand my peg, clip my rod up, set my gear up, because it's so important to what you end up catching, really is.
Do you feel like doing that first thing as well, like, and not having that bomb? So say, for example, you'd set your side tray up and spent half an hour doing all that and mixing your ground bait, maybe up to like a bit longer, and then sort of going, right, I'm at my box, start chucking a bomb around your peg. Do you feel that can disrupt your peg, and just that bit quicker?
Maybe it can disrupt my peg. I would say that's something that's on my mind, but more to the point, I love the extra thinking time.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to make a rash decision. So I will literally plumb up. And then while I'm setting up, and that's autopilot really, I'll be thinking to myself, right, what do I know about this area? Who's drawn here before? Where do I know how to fish? You know, second day I rang Des and had a little chat with him. He'd been in that area before. Right. Okay. I got a bit of information there. Spoke to a couple of other of my mates. And that's what dictated my decision. I didn't want to sit on my box after setting everything up and there's 40 minutes left and then chuck my bomb about. It just doesn't feel right to me. You're making a bit of a snap decision, and like you say, you're making a load of disturbance in your peg at the last minute. So, you know. Yeah,
fair enough. Guys, if you want to drop a question, it's actually that side for me, but if you want to drop a question, please do so and we'll fire them at Lee. But obviously, Sonubaits, we want to know what bait you used while you were there. There seemed to be a little theme across the majority of competitors. So what was the go-to mix while you were there?
You know, Jake, I'd love to say to you, oh yeah, crushed emp and black roach or something like that. But listen, as you're probably aware, 2 or 3 years ago, I started fishing with F1 Dark and Thatchers. It's brought me unbelievable success. Things spiral from there. And a lot of our consultants now know that Bream skimmers, that's an amazing combination. To put it this way, I only took that down there. I didn't take
that confident.
I didn't take another ground bait down there because I knew I wouldn't need any other type of ground bait down there. And for those that don't know,
I've actually got a couple.
It's almost like you knew that I was going to.
Almost like I knew that was going to.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, just so the guys know back at home, so to give you an idea, F1 Dark is really soft, and I'm calling it my base mix. I'm calling it the brown crumb of fish meals, right? That's how I think about it as a mix, right? And it's really soft and it's really light, a bit like brown crumb. So you've got to combine it with something to work with the depth. So Thatchers is very fine, and because Thatchers is fine and it's strong in fish meal, it's not our most powerful, but it's a nice, I'm calling it a medium fish meal. Yeah, if you mix Thatchers with F1 Dark, the more Thatchers you put in it, the stickier it'll become because it's finer and the ingredients are more. There's pellet based in there. There's some other ingredients in there that are a bit more sticky than what F1 Dark is. So effectively, my rule is if it's deeper, if the water's deep and I want my ground bait just to have a little bit of bite to it in order to make sure it gets down, I'll increase the F1 Dark. The Thatchers. If the water's shallower, I'll use F1 Dark. So take Southfield, for example. I use like 4 parts F1 Dark, 1 part Thatchers, because I don't need anything that's that sticky. And I also believe that because it's shallower, I don't want a really strong mix. I like the fact that my mix is F1 Dark. It's an amazing ground bait. Here on the first day, I mixed up 2 parts F1 Dark to 1 part Thatchers. And on the second day, I mixed up 3 parts F1 Dark to 1 part Thatchers because I knew I was going to much shallower water the second day.
Yeah.
So, and on the first day, I fished with a winder feeder, a cage winder feeder. I mixed my ground bait, let's call it medium, Jake. I don't over wet it. I don't have it bone dry. I just have it what we would all class as like a medium consistency. I'm sure everybody at home can relate to that. And it meant I could sort of nip it into the winder feeder, and the extra strength that comes with the Thatchers binds the whole mix together. I was 100% confident it was going to the bottom and breaking up how I needed it to. Now, when we used to go to Bow Beach, for example, I'd use 50-50 F1 Dark and Thatchers because it was so deep on all the pegs. You had to use a sticky ground bait. But on the second day, I fished with a cage feeder. I fished like a little cage feeder because it was only 8 foot deep. I wanted the ground bait to get down and break up quicker. So I knew I needed more F1 Dark because otherwise I'd end up with like hard blobs in my cage feeder, not acting quick enough. So they're the ground baits I take down. Bearing in mind, even if I was fishing for roach, I didn't have any other roach mixes. I just had that mix. And I'm going to say, Jake, that
putting a percentage on it.
I'm going to say 50 out of the 60 people at Tamar were using it. Yeah. Choose what? That's what I'm saying. Because when I walked along in the morning, there was a familiar waft everywhere. And also...
And people scuttling bags into their carry-outs trying to hide it.
And also, you know, I saw all those... I know every single sonar angler down there definitely had it. Definitely used it. So, you know, look, I appreciate that some people might want to stand out from the crowd. Go for it. Go and use 50-50 green. It's a brilliant mix, for example. Koi green, Super Crush Expander. There's so many different ground baits you can use, and you would also catch a load of fish. Super Sweet's a lovely mix as well. But when I'm like faced with a big final, and I'll tell you what happens or what big lessons I've learned, I'm going to say that mix has been chucked into Tamar all year. Kilos upon kilos upon kilos, right? The fish eat it. They love it. It's like you having toast in the morning. You still love your toast after 25 years or however old you are on this earth. So the point is that you don't always need to break the norm. Sometimes being the norm is the right way. Don't always look for an edge that isn't there, you know. So that's why that ground bait is very, very popular and very, very successful at that venue. It'll change over time, but at the moment, that's the winning mix without a doubt.
You know that's right, so you're not changing it, right? What's on your side tray that you've tinkered with throughout the day, whether it be worms, red worms, different bits and bobs? What's sort of gone through your mix throughout the
I'm a big fan of micro pellets for skimmers, Jake, and I took some 1 mils down, some of the 1 mils, because got those a few weeks back, and I was like, oh my god, super skimmer bait. So I've got some soaked up 1 mils.
And they soak up lovely, don't they, as well?
Absolutely brilliant. So the reason I want those in my peg is because I think that fish cleanly feed on pellets. I think a lot of ground bait turns to mist, but I think fish actively pick pellets up to eat. But because we were fishing for skimmers and that, I just felt like that would be a better thing. So I don't always put them in, but what I was doing was taking a little pinch and putting them in sort of every time I felt, oh, there's some fish here now, and I was blobbing them in. Then on my side tray, there was a pint of red maggots, 2 pints of casters, a kilo of worms, and some red worms. And that's the only baits I have on my side tray. I don't bother with corn and things like that for this particular match. I know that some people fished with like banjo feeders and method feeders, but it's not for me at the moment. It may be in the future, but it's not for me at the moment, and it's, you know, proved successful so far. And you don't need a big selection of baits. You know, I'm feeding a couple of pints of casters, and I'm not feeding a kilo of worms. I'm feeding like half a kilo, something like that. Maybe but you need a few for the hook bait as well. So, you know, you're not going through massive amount of bait. I mix up 2 kilo ground bait because you're casting in regularly, so you might get through some ground bait, but you know, you're not talking about a massive bait bill. Definitely not.
Good. We've had a few questions in now. So Richard Shiner has said he spoke to you on Sunday. Congratulations on the victory. Did you just fish the one line? I think we covered that bit, but why do you use extremity reels rather than centris for this sort of fishing?
This sort of fishing is as brutal as it gets. What anyone who will have seen any footage will see that I don't pump and wind my fish. I hook the fish, let it have its few kicks, and then steadily wind it in, and like that. That's how I believe in my heart is the quickest way to wind in. If I've got small fish on, I'm obviously just winding faster. The bigger the fish is, the steadier I'm winding, that sort of thing. An extremity reel is set up to almost pull a weight. That's how I'm going to describe it to people back home. Like I could put say a bucket on my grass and wind the bucket across the grass with an extremity. It would pull it. It's very slow on the retrieve, which makes it very powerful. It's got a lot of torque. So those reels for that are the only reels I will use. So I don't use a centris for any of that style of fishing. Rewind to those other finals I was telling you about. Match this, I only set centris reels up because I was pellet waggler fishing, where I'm going to be in and out all the time, just winding a waggler, so there's no resistance. Method feeder fishing, where if I hook a carp, I'm going to pull the carp back, wind towards the fish, pull the carp back, wind towards the fish. You're not directly winding a weight. And these reels, they're a much faster retrieve. So if you said to me, I'll race you back 50 meters, one versus the other, centris is winning every time. It's not even close, right? So that can be important. And when you're going like this, you want a fast retrieve. You don't want to be winding and not being able to catch up with what you're doing. So you pellet waggler, you need to wind. On the river, I fished with centrises when I was waggler fishing, and I fished with extremities for my feeder fishing because, again, I'm winding in a heavy weight. So That's the best way to describe it. An extremity is the reel of all reels. It is the find of my entire angling life, and
which is amazing. Which is amazing considering it's not a like expensive reel.
I will tell you now, right? When we were getting those into development, I thought, yeah, these look nice. These look nice, but it's no patch on a centrist. I honestly said that in the meeting, right? And then I got them on the bank, and I'm like, are you having a laugh? This is ridiculous. And it really, really, I encourage anyone who's feeder fishing in particular, or some people who maybe like waggler fishing for roach, where you're winding in roach and skimmers heavily all the time. It is the reel of all reels. And I think they're like 80 quid RRP.
Yeah, I remember you saying to me, you were just like, just get on them, just get on.
Just get them. Just get them. Just get them. And I've used a lot of really expensive reels in my time, and I also watch other people get let down by equipment. I've got the same 5 or 6 extremity reels that I've had for 3 years, and I've just cranked in fish for 3 years, and they're brilliant. So, if you're into that, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, lovely stuff. And that's, no worries. I think that's covered for you there, Richard. Alan Tompkinson, obviously we've covered the fact that you literally just took F1 Dart and Thatcher's to Tamar this weekend, well, weekend just gone. He's asked, do you use anything else with it, or do you just use it on its own? So because we've covered the Tamar, maybe just cover at other times, are there situations where other things come into play?
Yeah, look, there is. I've actually spent a lot of my summer using 50-50 green, because 50-50 green is very, very strong. And I believe in the warmer months, it definitely gets you an advantage. Particularly, F1 Dark is a beautiful mix, but it's very soft and it's very weak. It's a brown crumb. It's not brown crumb, but that's how I'm comparing it for people's minds. It's a crushed expander base. It's not crushed halibut pellet base, which is what goes into 50-50. There's crushed halibut pellets in it. So 50-50 is a brilliant mix. It's really strong. And if your venue is heavily carp fished, or, it's warmer, then it's a brilliant, brilliant mix. My mind has been expanded in terms of tastes and that as well on ground baits. And I'm a big fan of using things that sweeten my ground bait. I used Banoffee Bait Booster for a long time. I'm liking the Scopex at the moment, because the Scopex actually makes your bait yellow.
Yeah.
So this is going to sound a bit weird, but when you put some in your ground bait, it kind of glows.
Yeah.
So on clear waters, where not really like Tamar, but on clear venues where I'm using like a green mix, like
Very Meadows is one where a lot of people like a very almost like whoa.
I had a brilliant day at Ferry Meadows, Jake, and I used match method mix and 50-50 green, and I glugged in a big glug of the Scopex bait booster. So I've got a sweet fish meal ground bait that was like yellow, and when I chucked it out into the clear water, after about 40 minutes, I started catching bream, and I swear it was just like this cloud of like light green where I was catching, because the water's so clear. So it's working. So I just, I like things like that. I do like those. I tend to put the bait booster into my water, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like mix my water around and then get it into the ground bait, so it sort of gets through everything. That's what I've been doing. But yeah, that's a nice carry-on product, to give you a little bit of something different, to be honest.
Brilliant. Is Tamar possible to fish without a platform?
Yes. On the second day, I didn't set my platform up because I was fishing so close. I didn't want to wade out and be on top of myself. So when you're feeder fishing, that it only takes one more wind. It's not like pole fishing where you've got to get a whole new pole section out. So I literally just put my box down in the water's edge and didn't use a platform on the second day. I love a platform and I tend to set one up wherever I can, but 100% you could fish with Tamar with your box on the side of the water. 100%.
Yeah. Jamie Harrison cut out Thatcher's on day 2 and just used F1. Like what Lee was saying before, there are situations where that Jamie potentially used F1 green, Richard's saying there, which some people like a green ground bait for skimmers and bream, don't they? So
Yeah,
there's no reason why, if you are set on using a green ground bait, why you would not choose F1 green. Because
listen, F1 green, F1 dark, you know, it's like, it's up to you, really. I'm not sure the color makes a massive difference. If you like green, use the green, no problem at all. Yeah.
Lee, what was the Neil Swanick says, what was the best hook bait over the weekend?
Well, quite interesting, Neil. I caught on red worms first day, and then I caught on maggot second day, which was quite bizarre. But a couple of people said to me, Brett Clark and Andy Levers had told me that they'd caught some fish on maggots the day before, and maggots seemed good. So, yeah, caught on maggots second day and caught on red worms on the first day. Classic skimmer baits, Neil. Nothing really, you know, too dramatic. And I just used a 14 N20 to 014 AccuPower both days. I literally just tied up 20 on one spool, and that was me. Yeah. I need to re-tie them now for Southfield.
And when you're fishing are you fishing a single maggot on a big hook, size 14?
I fished double maggot when the skimmers were there, but single maggot when I was trying to. The reason that came about is I put one on to catch a few roach and caught a skimmer really fast, and I thought, so I put 2 maggots on and caught well with that as well. Yeah. Sometimes people get sucked into, again, if there's 60 people putting red worms on the hook and you put maggots on and it goes round, you've got a big advantage over people, haven't you? So maybe they get a little bit wary when they've been caught on the same hook bait too much.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's a lot of people saying well done, so you'll have to read through the comments after we're finished.
I will say thank you to everybody. I've had a lot of well dones, and I honestly really appreciate it. I really, really do. It's what makes it a brilliant success, you know. Like, that's how I said it on the podium. If it wasn't for the people, it wouldn't be worth anything. So it's brilliant that everybody's been so kind. So thank you.
Yeah. Afternoon, Lewis. If you only had, I think, well, you might have covered it. If you only had a choice of one hook length, just go through everything. And what bait and hook, what would it be?
I've just told you, 014 AccuPower to a 14 N20. I honestly, I try a million different hooks and all the rest of it, but for my feeder fishing, 014 is pretty much strong enough for me to pull anything in. I don't tend to go too much thicker than that. And a 14 N20 will, my hand was destroyed. That's how sharp it was, and stays sharp, pricks everything. I just think it's the only hook. If you know, it's so good. I love N30s. But N30s for me, a bit more breamy. You know, there's little skimmers and roach. N20, it's only one hook, in my opinion.
Quick hook as well, aren't they? They're very like straight point sort of thing, and you can.
Oh yeah, no, it's just like it's like a little square at the bottom, and it's like just like you imagine when a fish sucks that in. I don't know how it can get it out.
Yeah,
the point's too sharp and right there. They'd have to like it's really difficult. So like you know, it just makes sense. Whereas a beaked point hook, there is potential to spit it out without pricking yourself, you see, or just nick yourself, and it doesn't really hold in. So that's why I prefer that style.
Yeah, fair enough. Where were we up to? Right. So Krista Orrell, slightly away from Tamar, but if you were faced with using fishery only pellets, no ground baits allowed either, what's your go-to to make your pellets stand out?
Well, that's sweet. The bait booster, the Scopex bait booster. Again, that I put that on my pellets, on the fishery pellets at Hayfield. Like for me, if I'm using any sort of softened pellet, I will put that on. It makes them yellow, it makes them sweet. There is nothing not to like. I really encourage people to have a look at that because it works really well. On hard pellets, I love a pellet oil. It's like the worst kept secret ever, but for me, every single pellet, even if you get like a Coppins fishery hard pellet, you get an odd floater, and I can't be doing with it. I need to know that my bait hits the water and sinks, because I don't want like a few floating and drifting down and sinking. I also don't want them sinking when I don't want them to sink. So squirt of pellet oil. Usually just use F1. And I always have one in my bag. Just get my fishery pellets, one squirt, give it a stir around. That's it, finished. Then your pellets are sinking 1,000,000%, and the fish seem to go nuts over it. So good for me.
Good stuff. Hi Lee, weird question. I best read it before I read it to you. I do a fair bit of fishing on the Trent, and I've been tempted to add some 2 mils to my ground bait mix for bream. Is that a good idea or not? I know pellets are used for barbel.
100%. The thing is, with a Trent and with skimmers, 2 mil, you want like Fin Perfect or Pro Feed. You don't want a halibut pellet for the bream, in my opinion. The 2 mil normal pellets will be eaten by big roach, by chub, by barbel, and by bream in particular. And they love that sort of like weaker fish meal, if you like. Bream will eat halibut pellets, absolutely, but I think you're being really specific. So get yourself some 2 mil Fin Perfects. You need to soak them for 2 minutes because you want them softened and plump, but you don't want them breaking down. And yeah, you can just put a great big handful in your ground bait if you want to, but I like to blob them in so I'm in control. So effectively just take a nip, a big pinch every time and do it. Just do yourself a pint of pellets. Jobs are good, and I would say that'd be perfect. It's something that I do anywhere that I go bream fishing where pellets are allowed. I never don't have them with me. So, and the 1 mils will do a similar thing. Like in the flow, these sort of 2 mil pellets, 1 mil pellets, they're almost like a heavy ground bait. So they don't all waft up off the bottom. You actually get something that'll hug the bottom, which is what makes them so good. So yeah, that'd be a must for me for sure.
Good stuff. Right, we're going to we'll pick up some more questions. So if you've got any more, fire them over. But we'll just move back to the weekend's fishing. So you've fished day one. You've got £30 in the bag. You're looking at it and you think, right, I'm right in contention here. What's your mindset going into day two? Are you nervous? Are you just thinking, right, it's another match, I'm going to fish it as an individual, exactly as I did the first day? What are you thinking?
Well, your mind goes crazy. You try to dull it with a pint or two on Saturday night. And last year, the previous year's event, Jake, I haven't looked up the ounces, but I'm going to say practically exactly the same weight as I had this year. 32.14 I had this year. I would think I was within 5 or 6 ounces of that the year before. And £37 was winning, 36.5 was winning this year. I was 7th. I think I was 6th before. So I sort of packed up and walked around and thought, I can win this. I can win this for sure because I've won it from here before. But I was also a little bit frustrated. I'm not going to sit here and say I was perfect on day one. I fished a really nice match, in my opinion, until about 45 minutes to go. And I'm not going to blame Joe, but Joe came down, kept miles back, and I said, how's it going? And he tried to be quiet because he knows I'm going to get distracted. And I chatted to him, and it's going well. I've just had 2 in 2. And he sort of went, well, good, keep it up sort of thing. Anyway, I sort of sat there and thought to myself, was that a bite? And I picked up and I bumped one, and I'd sort of lost concentration for the first time all day. And I had a little iffy period. And at the end of the match, I said to you earlier, they're 5 for £3. I reckon I cost myself, but I was 5 fish short first day. If I'd have had 5 fish more, I'd have honestly said to you, I couldn't have caught another fish. And that kind of annoyed me because I was 3.5 pounds behind. And I thought I'd be winning. So all night, every time I thought about it, it just annoyed me. So I was like, don't think about it.
Did that bumped fish just kill it for a few minutes?
Yeah, I'll tell you what happened. It sort of killed it for a little bit. And I tried a bit too hard to get him back because there wasn't a lot of time to go. And I caught like 4 in the last 40 minutes, 5, where I'd been catching like 15 an hour. So I felt I probably cost myself 5 fish. And was annoyed at myself because I'd fished really nicely up until then. And I don't know, I just let my mind slip. It was my fault for letting my mind slip. And I thought, I was angry. So going into day 2, I thought, if I draw a peg where I've got a chance, I'm having like 5 hours solid concentration. I am not allowing that minor slip to distract me because, effectively it's going to be close. I've drawn a brilliant peg. My peg didn't throw up. It had £26 first day. It wasn't a £30 plus peg first day. But it's an area where those skimmers are known to live. And I fancied it. I knew that I had to fish for skimmers on this peg. There was lots of options. Some, like the previous year, I had to fish for roach second day. That was still an option on some pegs. There'd have been some pegs where you have to cast a long way. So the pegs, I mentioned Jamie earlier, on the second day, those pegs where Jamie and Steve were, you cast a bit longer, but there's a lot of fish there. So I was like, well, I'm in control of everything here today. The only thing I'm not in control of, there was some cormorants up and down, and I just hope that they didn't affect it that much to cost me. And I've started the day and there was more skimmers. So on the first day, I only had 4 after 2 hours. I had 20 roach and 4 skimmers, and then it got good. Well, on the second day, we'd sort of got 10 after an hour. And then it was like, it was hard. There was a lot of cormorants about, and it really affected the fishing. And like, I remember getting to about 3 hours and only having like 17, 18 skimmers. And really, I sort of thought, that's it. I'm not going to win now. Just consolidate best I can. But I had some good friends in the area the day before who had told me that the skimmers fed late. So all the time in my mind, I'm thinking, if we get a bit of a rest here, I will be able to catch fast. And because of that, I didn't go searching fish. I stuck with what I was doing. And they came on, and Jake, when they were in my peg, I was catching, I would say 6 in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Really fast. Like in 30 seconds, got one, play it in, unhook it, chuck back out. And I finished the match with 49 skimmers, obviously the magical number. I weighed exactly the same weight within 4 ounces of the day before. And I honestly think on the second day that I caught the maximum I could have caught. I mean, people always say, you can always catch 1 or 2 more fish. Well, I'll be honest, for what was in my peg and how I was fishing my peg, I didn't feel like that. On the first day, I felt I could have done. On the second day, I didn't. So I sort of packed up and thought, this is, it's out of my hands. And then obviously rumours start to circulate that you might be winning it. And I'll be honest, I was in absolute disbelief, complete disbelief, because I've been very lucky in the past with different matches. I felt I'd drawn 2 decent pegs, but I just was like, this can't happen again, surely. It just can't. 2 in a row. And
who was in your mind? So when you've obviously the situation from day 1, and you've seen who's drawn where for day 2, who was in your mind where you were thinking, well, I think that they could beat me, because there must have been somewhere they were above you or near you, and you thought, well, their draw's not really capable of.
Yeah, there was a couple of people. Kevin Hall had for me a standout weight first day of £34 on my bank. I felt he'd drawn a poor peg. I thought he'd do exceptionally well to catch a big weight. That was proved right. So I was like, okay. There was 2 or 3 others that I thought the same. The sort of one that had gone under the radar was Dave Berry, and he'd had a fantastic first day, but I didn't take note of where he'd drawn second day because I just missed it as I was organising in the morning. And because he's drawn peg 1, which is very strong for roach and small fish on its day, I think that he sort of went under the radar because you never you're never having that magical spell. You're just catching small fish. And when they walked up, they said, "Oh, Dave Berry's had 28 pound on peg 1." And my brain immediately said, "You need over 30 pound to beat Dave Berry."
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, that's close. That's close. I don't like that.
You had your 49 skimmers, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I thought they were slightly.
All of a sudden, you're like, "There's all of them skimmers today."
I
I'm
know.
sure
Well, I thought I was going to have like 35 pound, if I'm being honest. And so I thought, yeah, I've got 30. I've got 30. And when I pulled my net out, I thought that is close. That is really close. And obviously 32. And then you're trying to figure out who else, obviously there's not just me doing it. There's 5 or 6 other people. Joe was on my bank. He's finding out the weights left, right and centre because the Preston need to know what's going on. And the talk is I'm going to win. And as it transpired, that's what happened. And, like I said, Jake, I've been unbelievably fortunate to win things in the past, and this weekend I felt that I fished well, but I had 2 very good pegs, and that's what you need. I mean, when the previous time I won, I felt I was in 2 good areas. This time I felt I was in a good area first day and a good peg second day. I only felt there was like maybe 1 or 2 pegs in that area, not like 5 like there was the first day. So, it has to go your way. But I won by £2. And I'm going to rewind and say 5 skimmers is £3. So over 2 days, 5 skimmers less, and I don't win Feedermasters.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's a given. 10 skimmers less over 2 days, which is very easy to do. And I'm not even in the top 3. So yeah, you need things to go well. I'm just going to pull this door to before crying kids come in the house. So you need to draw well, but you've also got to fish well in those scenarios as well. So I felt very fortunate that it looked to me like it had all come together, and it's still a bit surreal now. The first one was good. I really appreciated it, and I felt myself win it. And this time I'm still in a bit of disbelief, really. It's like, no, that can't be there. Do you know what I mean? It's just, I've been very, very lucky, and a great weekend. Everybody was buzzing, to be honest. The feedback from the event is fantastic. The coverage is second to none. Everybody who's not there wants to be there. Everybody who's there wants to get back there. What more do you want from fishing matches, really? It's just amazing. So
yeah. And so obviously when you look at it's a top 3 all Sonu, which I was obviously made up with. Dave Berry second, he's done brilliant. Jamie Harrison third, and on the second day he had a mega weight, didn't he? 38 pound.
Yeah, I was next to Jamie first day, and Jamie had a brilliant practice match. He'd done really well, and on the first day of the event, it didn't go for him. I think he had one of those days where it just doesn't go for you. You know what I mean? You this is what I'm talking about. 10 skimmers less or more, and Jamie wins Feedermasters. And for whatever reason, maybe it's his peg, maybe he chose an area that he could have chose different. Only he will know. I don't know, but he's a brilliant angler. So then on day 2, when I heard Jamie had a big weight, because I'll be honest, Jamie had £20 first day. He would have been about 35th, I would say. I bet maybe even.
He was the big mover, definitely.
35th, 36th out of 60. So, and it just goes to show how you can shoot up the leaderboard. To come third, I'm sure he'll be delighted. And listen, you've only got to look down the top 20, Jake, and tell me how many used Sonubaits. So, I feel like for skimmers and Bream, it's hard to beat, isn't it? So, I bet you were delighted. I want to. You mentioned Dave Berry there as well. I want to talk a little bit about Dave Berry, because he's not necessarily a Sonu angler that everyone watching will know as well as, say, Jamie. But Dave is in a club of 4 people who have qualified for all 5 Feedermaster finals ever. That on its own is an outstanding achievement.
Yeah.
And in the 4 previous finals, he'll be the first to say that he's not had the best of finals, be that his draw, choices he's made, whatever. And I haven't had the privilege of presenting him any money. And when I knew he was second, I was absolutely over the moon, because he's a fully committed feeder angler, and his hard work has got the results. And no one can tell me that if you don't work hard, you don't get the results, because of Dave Berry. He has put full maximum effort into his feeder fishing, and he's come from, relatively nowhere to being the 5 times finalist who's come second overall. Yeah. What a hero. So, anybody who out there who aspires to achieve anything in their discipline, just look as far as Dave Berry, because I think that, you can do it for sure.
Definitely. Right, let's get on to the last few questions and then see where we're up to then. So, which flavour bait booster liquid would you use on pellets or preparing expanders for F1s and small carp?
Again, Scopex. If you use the Scopex one, it'll make your expanders yellow. If you don't want to do that, Banoffee for me. Des loves washed out. It's up to you, really. The other ones don't change the colour of your bait. The Scopex one does.
And Flora.
So, yeah, so if you want yellow expanders, here's a tip. They're really good. Then I suggest you use the Scopex one, because that will make your expanders yellow. It's thicker than water, so what you need to do is pump your expanders, or if you're using pro expanders, soak your expanders, take the water off them, and then just glug some on. And I glug it on, stir it round. If you leave it about 30 minutes, it's like kind of disappeared. You've seen my expanders, Jake. They look awesome, don't they? Yeah. They're like a dense expander that have gone yellow, sweet, perfect.
Yeah. And if you do the sort of full of water into the fridge, make sure that it's mixed into your water. What can happen if you pour it into a tub, the bait booster will sink, your water will be here. If your expanders are sat just in the bait booster, you can find that the next morning your expanders are actually still a little bit hard, because if they're just sat in bait booster, it sort of doesn't absorb enough like water does to soften right through.
That's why I like to soak them first, Jake. I love to soak them first and then put the bait booster on, because of what you're saying there. If not, you've got to shake it vigorously to make sure it's really mixed between. And even then, over time, it will settle out.
Yeah, definitely. And it's important to remember with bait booster, the actual base liquid is always a sweet liquid. It's what flavors we add to it. So you've got the krill and squid there. So obviously to taste it, it'll taste sweet, but sweet and fishy. The others, obviously, Banoffee, Scopex, everything like that is obviously a sweet flavor. But the base liquid is very, very sweet. Well done, Mr. Kerry, on the recent win. Question: would you ever consider a hybrid feeder on a canal, depth 3 to 5 meters, 30 to 60 meter wide? So a wide canal, probably Gloucester Canal sort of.
Yeah, I would use a Banjo XR rather than the one mentioned above, but I would absolutely consider it if you're on a good peg where there's a good amount of fish. Yes, that sort of setup is very, very important. So I'm just having a fresh cup of tea brought to me, Jake.
Oh, can't be bad. Mine's I'm slacking.
Serious, like you're like doing.
It is serious, but anyway, thanks anyway. It's I would use it. I would use it on like a Gloucester Canal or something like that. That is what I would do. I would I would use wherever there's a load of fish. The only thing you got to watch out for on canals and those sort of things, it can be very soft bottom. They also, you might find that fish are sitting up off the bottom. So you need a hook length, I always think, to help draw your fish down, to follow your fish down. I tend to find that sort of feeder is really good if I'm getting a lot of liners and indications, which is what makes it so great on commercials. There's a lot more fish on commercials, so you can use that style of feeder because the fish are aggressive at the feeder. On the Gloucester Canal, it's not exactly a place I know for aggressive fishing, but if I was in one of the bays where there's a lot of fish, that's when I would use it. So on the venue that he's going to, if there's a lot of fish and you're getting lots of liners and indications, clip your banjo on, chuck it across, and I'm sure you'll get good results.
Lovely stuff. Fantastic effort. Are there any tips for feeder fishing on a small commercial coming into the colder months?
Yeah. The most important tip I can give in this aspect is to reduce the amount of bait. Okay, so you don't want to be chucking a large feeder on a small commercial. Small commercials, fish are grouped, they're tight together. So what you need to do is use small feeders like an ICM pellet feeder or an ICM banjo, little feeders, cast around, find where the fish are by feeding very small amounts of bait. There's a fantastic video that I did about 2 years ago at Packington. If you look on the Preston Innovations page, watch that video. It's a classic example of a small commercial, how I search for the fish using very, very small amounts of bait. And then when you find them, you get really good runs. You're not going to be able to feed fish to you in winter on a small commercial. It's more important to find them than to gather them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. Thought it was funny. Thought it was funny that you fancied Ian's peg better. Thanks for the answer on the extremity. Need to order a couple more. Lee, when would you prefer sinking hookbait over wafting for a method?
I personally think a wafting hookbait is brilliant when you are targeting an individual fish. So let's give the classic wafter scenario, which is Boddington, right? You chuck out a large feeder with an amount of bait. It's a target. There is no way on this planet that 2 or 3 fish are going for that feeder at the same time. One fish, there it is, boom, down, sucks it in, on. I think wafters are brilliant for that. So whenever I'm chucking out and there's no indications and I'm waiting for bites, a wafter is the way, right? Now, on the flip side of that, what I don't want to do is I'm going to use Larford as a brilliant example. Anyone who's been to Larford, in the margins, there's crazy carp. Like there's carp everywhere. The water's shallow. Fish are in and around your method feeder. For me, that's not a scenario for wafters. It's more for sinking baits, a sinking version of a wafter if you want something bright, or a hard pellet, because I believe that there'll be lots of fish there and they will suck in at your bait. And when I've been out filming and we did some underwater stuff, that was very obvious to me. When there was just one fish coming in, a wafter's going to gain you an advantage. It's going to be sucked in as part of the meal.
Almost accidentally with the sort of the dinner plate of bait that you've left for them.
Absolutely. It's like, whoa, that's an easy meal. Ooh, and often they come to the colour. So the colour's still important. They come in because of the colour. Oh, look, yellow. They come in, oh, look, pellets, suck the entire thing. Boom, got it, right? Whereas when there's lots of competing baits, the sinkers are much more effective, which is why I always carry both. I always have a tub of sinkers. I always have a tub of wafters. If your peg is competitive and you're getting lots of liners, on the sinker, 100%.
Lovely stuff. Kevin Edwards, if you could buy only one rod for general purpose fishing for all species on a match lake, what would it be? Oh, that's a tough one.
Oh God, one rod, I think I'd retire. I'm going to assume you're feeder fishing, and I would say if you got yourself a 10 or 11 foot, you're going to cover most things. Treat yourself to an 11 foot, one of the 11-foot rods.
Supera or Monster X.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the cheaper ones, which name escapes me at the moment. Tyson's is what we used to have. I've forgotten what the inertias, is that right? So, you want, in my opinion, a nice all-round 11-footer like that is going to do a really good job. So that's what I would go for. If you're only picking one, or those cheap rods that we've got at the moment are brilliant. The quality is brilliant, and they're like 50 quid. And I know it's a lot of money, but I would probably treat myself to two, and then I'd be able to have a range of situations, maybe like a 9 and an 11-foot.
Fair enough. Paul Staniford, congratulations on the current season. Some amazing wins. True professional. Just goes to show all the hours of prep and those slight changes to rigs make all the difference. Well done. Plenty of comments like that, Lee, for you.
Thank you.
Paul's got a question. I think we'll call this the last one unless someone sneaks one in last second. One question is around how tight you have the tip on a method. Do you have a tight line, slack line, or just a slight bend in the tip?
That's a lovely question.
Ignition rods, Lee.
I'm obsessed with my tip, Jake. I'm obsessed with my tip. So what I do is I tighten right down to the feeder. So I cast out, I sink my line slowly, do not move the feeder, right? Once it's sunk, I tighten everything slowly so my tip is bending towards where I'm fishing. I believe that straightens out all your line rather than having it tight with a bow, right? So you'll see it, your tip will bend round and then it'll very slowly start to come back as it's almost pulling everything straight. And then I slacken the tip off so it's straight, but the line is still tight. So effectively what I've done there is I can read the tip very accurately because any indications on the line will show on the tip. And there isn't like a really tight line to my feeder to put fish off. Hopefully it's got a bit of give in it where the fish might bump into it and not realize they've hit it and things like that. And then I can watch the full bite develop. So for me, that is the perfect way to have your tip for all feeder fishing, not just method feeder fishing.
Fair enough. Right. I think we're just over an hour, Lee, an hour and 10 minutes or so. I think that we will wrap that up there.
Everybody's had a nice lunchtime break.
Yeah, hopefully. So yeah, you'll all have to get back to work or whatever you're getting on with. I think I'll get some dinner as well. But once again, congratulations. You'll have to go through all the comments because there's loads of comments flooded in.
Well, like I said before, Jake, hugely grateful. Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna have my